Uh. All right. Testing, testing. Beautiful. Now let's get some music rolling. Music rolling. Music rolling. Music rolling. Oh. All right. I'm gonna have to do. Let's see. Window capture. I have so many window captures right now. Okay. Don't look at that. It didn't exist. Now, if I. Alright, let's see. Lines of P. Can I get the Overture? Ooh, all the records is great. Alright, now I have to see if I can hear it. I can't hear it. Let me. Properties. Capture audio. Haha. This. Alright. It's not working. Okay. Does it work now? Okay. Does it work now? Okay. All right. Machine is working. I'm gonna turn this. All right.
Up ever so slightly.
All right.
Up ever so slightly.
All right. Troubleshooting and scuff defeated.
Troubleshooting.
And we wait. Hello, Nashtifer. You are here nearly just in time, like less than 60 seconds ahead of time. How's my music to speech volume since you're here? Sorry, Discord, not Discord, not stream delay. Oh, Rumble. He says. Who means nothing to me. Music quieter? Music louder? What do you think? Alright. Ooh, I should make sure that chat is there. There we go. It's good. Solid. Wonderful. I'm a genius. There's probably a way to do this without 18 million sources in my OBS, but I do not care. Alright. Now's the time. Ah, crap, I forgot my water. One moment. I'm gonna be yapping for like at least 2 straight hours here. I'm gonna need water. tooting my own horn, only to foil myself. Such is the way of things. All right, intro time. Hello, everyone. Hello, Internet. Hello, Nation. Hello, Ghost Chat. Hello, viewers past, present, and future. Hello, Nurse, and welcome to this, my Lies of P boss battle tier list. Now, I did one of these for me side after I played it, where I ranked all the metas, and there are a couple more bosses than there were metas, depending on how you define a meta, I guess. But anyway, so I'm gonna be ranking all of the Lies of P bosses based on my own opinion, which is the one that matters to me. Anyway, so let's start with a quick. First, I'll go over how I prefer to do tier lists. I am a person that numbers don't mean anything to me. They're just, well, they're numbers, right? A lot of people really like numbers. I don't, and the lettered rating system is just numbers in disguise. So I am going to make my tiers completely different. I will decide what those tiers are as I place them. It'll be a nice little surprise, right? But it will not be things like, okay, it will not be S tier. It will be things like super duper omega awesome tier, that kind of thing, right? And so that is how I will classify the tiers. As for how I am ranking each of these boss fights, right? I'm going to keep in mind several things. First is difficulty. Lies of P is a Souls-like, and I feel that the correct level of challenge. Hello, Elena. Welcome to the tier list stream. Lies of P is a Souls-like, and I feel like the correct level of challenge is very, very important to a Souls-like identity. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that hard equals good, and that the harder the better. There needs to be an appropriate level of challenge for where the boss occurs in the game, and also without being frustrating. There's a difference between challenge and frustration, and there's a couple boss fights where I'm going to get into that. Second qualification is, of course, fun. Did I find fighting the boss fun? It's a video game. That is, of course, point number one. Kind of maybe the most important qualification, actually. If I was a more prepared or scripted person, I might have listed that first. But yeah, fun. How much fun did I have? Story. Lies of P has a fantastic story, and each of the bosses has a place in the story. So part of my ranking of them will be their role in the story and how well they fulfilled it. A lot of this will be lead up to the boss as well. And anybody watching, of course, if you have any questions, qualifiers, whatever, insults, just let them rip. I'll answer them as I can. Let's see. Style. Style is one of the most important stats in anything. And this is especially true for a boss. And style can mean any number of things. It can mean presence, aesthetic, just a general sense of je ne sais quoi, right? And this is probably the most subjective part of my ranking, but that's fine. And finally, design. And by design, I mean like from a game design perspective. This is kind of wrapped up into difficulty, but something can be difficulty which something can be difficult without being uniquely or interestingly designed. And something can be easy while being really quirkily designed and interesting, right? Playing through games as part of my streaming career and like talking about them and finding things to talk about, game design has been on my brain a lot, and it's a concept that fascinates me with the energy of an armchair specialist because of course I'm not a game designer. But yeah, so that's primarily what's going to go into this. There will be other things, right? But this is the main thing where it comes to determining their ranking. Not everything is weighted equally. I'm not a robot, I'm a person. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to go with my gut. But that's enough rambling about how this is going to work. Now, let's get to work. We're going to start with, we're going to do the bosses in order. And so we're going to start with the Parade Master. And I have a nice pictorial reference here. This is the Parade Master. He's the first boss in the game. Um, I don't have a terrible amount to say about the Parade Master. Like, he is the first boss. He feels very first bossy. I died to him a couple times, but when I had the rematch in Overture, I wasn't particularly challenged by it, right? I do think the most interesting thing about this boss, from a style perspective, is his second phase, where he whips off his head and uses it as a club. Like, I think that's maybe the best thing about this boss, just because it kind of announces to the player exactly what to expect from this game visually. This is telling you that, yes, we do have a dark and serious story going on here with a steampunky clockwork aesthetic, right? But we're going to mess with that. We are going to ruin it. And that's actually kind of a very constant theme in Lies of P, is the idea of ruination, right? Even in Overture, where we go back in time, Krot still sucks dong. It has been ruined, right? We never get to participate in Krot when it is not in a state of ruin. So having this guy literally decapitate himself to beat you to death with his head is kind of awesome and a great way to telegraph that. Um, Now, unfortunately, again, I have very little more to say on this, just because, like, frankly, it wasn't a terribly memorable boss. I had a different first boss in my brain until I was looking at the tier list again and went, oh, hey, yeah, I guess that guy did exist, right? But he did his job. He was the first boss, and, like, most of the time, the reason I remember Souls like first bosses is because in the mainline Dark Souls games, they kill you. That's your hello to Dark Souls. You die. You die. You die. Right? This guy didn't kill you though, and I think that's fine. I think maybe Dark Souls' approach to that, like, back when Dark Souls came out in, like, oh god, it was the mid 2000s, I think, was the first Demon Souls actually. I don't want to think about how long ago that was. Anyway, the idea of the first boss being an almost scripted loss was a really novel thing. But I think in modern day game design, it's not. Yeah, it was on the PS3. I remember that. Um, and I don't think it's good engagement or a great way to draw players in to have the first boss just be so difficult that it it frustrates your players and isn't feasibly. Oh gosh darn it. No, give me. There we go. Damn it. There we go. I'm a streamer, everybody. But no. Alright, I'll figure this out somehow. I'll do that maybe. Yeah, I'll always. Okay. Sorry figuring out Windows and such. Anyway. But yeah, off topic, this is not Dark Souls, this is Lies of P. It's its own thing. And again, I think they made the correct lock tier list window in OBS. Oh, is that what that button does? Blunk. Oh, dang, that was real smart. Thank you, Nashtifer. You can tell I'm super experienced and knowledgeable with this whole streaming thing. But yeah, that's really all I've got to say about the Parade Master. And so, with him out of the way, we will dub our first tier. We're gonna put it right in the middle, and we're gonna say that sure was a boss. Like, he was a boss battle. He existed. I have no strong feelings about the man one way or the other. That sure was a boss fight. Yeah. Uh, and now we move on to the Mad Donkey. Donkey. All right. The Mad Donkey is our second boss, and frankly, I sympathize with the man. He was trying to kill Geppetto. That that was where we found this dude. Was literally knocking on the door of the carriage Geppetto was hiding in, ready to murk that guy. And after having played through Lies of P and Overture, same bestie. I'm sad I didn't let you. What a. Actually, no, no. I want to kill Geppetto with my own bare hands and also your weapon because I used your blade for most of my playthrough. That said, out of all the stalkers, we know very little about him, right? And this is where I'd like to bring up something about the stalker boss fights in general. They're they're all kind of a bit samey, right? Like they are all a human move set, a human body type that flinches, right? And flinches is not the same as staggering. Staggering is no mechanic, right? But when I say flinch, I mean typically when you hit them, they buckle and stumble. Most bosses don't do that, right? The human-shaped ones tend to, and it's a humongous weakness. Uh, and in regards to like Souls-like games in general, my strategy often you've noticed me play several Souls-like games is to wield the really big weapons with the really high stagger values because making your opponents flinch is it's way easier. So a boss that just flinches at a stiff breeze is by and large not as difficult. They're fast and they're nimble. And I think they may have been an experiment to like pull in a real fake PvP aspect to Lies of P. But I don't think Lies of P needs PvP. Not saying it doesn't need the Stalker fights, but yeah, the Stalker fights all relatively feel the same. They're a human-shaped enemy that flinches uh, with a with a weapon you can in theory get, right? So they're not doing anything crazy. They in fact uh, unless they have some extra sauce, which the Mad Donkey does not, have less of a move set than P because they don't have his arm, right? Although this is clearly not the boss, this is P wearing the outfit. Here, I have a second image of him. No, I don't. I gave up on that, I guess. Anyway, spoiler alert for the next boss we're talking about. But yeah, and so where most stalkers are going to do well is in their story and their style, because at just about every stalker enemy you can get their drip, right? And a lot of them are very important to the story. The Mad Donkey is not. There was a little bit of lore behind him, but it was incredibly forgettable. He does get points because his mask is objectively hilarious. That said, I'm going to give. Let's see. I'm going to give this the Mad Donkey, and let's see here. I'll add row above. We're going to make this row a blue. And we're going to say Stalker Drip tier. Basically, like this guy is just like any other stalker enemy. You get cool gear from him, and that's all she wrote. That is the purpose of this enemy. Um, Still, I like him a lot better now that I played through Overture, and I really, really want Geppetto dead. More accurately, I want to kill Geppetto myself because, yeah, yeah, he's a bastard. Now we're finally going to get into the good stuff. We're going to talk about the scrapped Watchman. Now, where shall I begin with Mr. Watchman here? So there is a lot of lead up actually to the fight with the Watchman. You get to learn that he was a literal kind of like a constable puppet. But more notably, you learn that he really liked children. This puppet was very protective and very soft towards children. And you actually get to interact with a child who was friends with the Watchman, right? Before everything went cuckoo bananas. You even, if you pay attention to item descriptions, lore, and other things, do get a very, very obvious hint as to what to expect from the Watchman. You learn that he was an experiment with a puppet that harnessed electrical charge as a weapon. So this boss had some fantastic preamble, some really cool story to it, and this is the boss that I actually kind of considered the first boss of base game Lies of P. Because I forgot the Puppet Master existed, the Parade Master existed, and barely considered the Mad Donkey boss. And so the scrapped constable, like the scrapped watchman, the boss fight itself is also like an excellent introduction to basically all of Lies of P's mechanics, right? It has the very important like blocking, unblockable lock thing. I think its hands are even breakable. I'm not 100%. I have to go back, right? But on top of that, it introduces you to the first status effect, shocked or electric shock, right? As far as like you encounter it before, right? But he's the first enemy that really threatens you with it, and it can be nasty, right? And his second phase, the entire fight is very cinematic, and I love the scene where he crawls along that building and he jumps in to get you. Like overall, like third boss is the charm. They went absolutely all out with the scrapped Watchman. I have a single complaint though, and it is a big one from the purpose of a design perspective. So after I beat Lies of P on stream, I played a different playthrough about halfway through the game, just kind of on my own. The point of this playthrough is I've talked about Lies of P's scaling mechanics and how basically you're either an advanced build or you're an everything else build, right? And so went through the game on stream, I was an everything else build, a physical build. I decided to try advanced because it's basically a whole other game that way, right? And from the purpose of design, Watchman is terrible if you're an advanced build. Like, because here's the thing. He's very resistant to Electric Blitz, which literally every other puppet is weak to. Like, they flat out tell you that Electric Blitz is the anti-puppet element, right? And then this guy's resistant to it. In his second phase, he is just flat out immune to electrical damage, right? And if you don't know what you're doing, you're playing Lies of P for the first time, and you decide you want to go into this elemental build, and you find the first and by the way only elemental weapon up until this point is the electric club, and you go into the Watchman with it like I did, you're gonna have an awful time. Like I did. I had to switch weapons. I had to change to my starting weapon just to kill the Watchman and get on with my life. This problem never really comes up again because by the time you encounter another boss, like A, they don't lie to you, puppets are weak to electricity, humans are weak to fire, you have a second element, so even if something is immune to an element, you have an option. But the Watchman really should have either not been immune, like resistant is one thing, but flat out immune to electric blitz damage, or he should have been the next boss. Like, swap this boss's place with another boss. I understand why they wanted him here. I even think he was in a lot of the Lies of P promotional material, and for good reason. Again, if you're playing anything but advanced, this boss is very close to peak, right? But we weren't quite there just because he is a horrible experience, likely to maybe even chase players off if they are running advanced as their first build and have no idea what they're doing. So we're going to make this tier so close. We were this close to greatness. And that's where the scrapped Watchman will go. I forgot. This is also just a sick image. Kind of blurry resolution, but just the grapple attack cinema, like he really was so close to an absolutely top tier boss. He's still really good. I cannot give him a top tier ranking when an entire build has no options against him because of when you fight him in the game, right? All right, so the next boss on the chopping block is a boss that has a very special place in my heart, but basically nowhere else. The Survivor. Now, this guy has a bit of story you can read up on. Yes, very dapper. Has a bit of story you can read up on if you look at his outfit. He was one of the Bastards, which is the best name for a mercenary organization I've ever heard, even if the guy who ran it was a bastard. Uh, but yeah, he's when you find him, he's basically gone nuts with terror. He might have also, looking back on it, been showing signs of the madness of the petrification disease, right? But he also teaches you a couple important lessons mechanically. Up until this point, every boss has been a slow slugger, which is kind of the norm with like Souls-like bosses. Even the Mad Donkey, who was human-sized, wielded a fairly slow weapon. This guy is the first guy to come at you with a flurry. He is fast, he jabs, he lunges, he stabs. Because of how you've been fighting literally every other enemy in the game, he can trip you up, and it's good that you get to fight someone like him early, right? And on top of that, this guy has like my favorite stalker mask in the game. I was running the yin yang rat head for a long time, and I was so happy when I got the prince outfit to go with it. And I was the Rat Prince. It was so much fun. Probably maybe my favorite mask actually. I like a lot of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood masks, but you couldn't get them in base game, and this mask was just so cool. Unfortunately, like most of the stalkers, there's not a lot to say about him, and I think, do I put him in the stalker tier? Yes, I'm gonna put him in the stalker tier, but he's going to probably sit very close to the top or at the top of the stalker tier just because of my personal preference for his outfit and the fact that he was like an important stepping stone mechanically in Lies of P, right? All right. Next image. All right. So next up is the Puppet of the Future. If you don't remember this boss, I don't blame you. I kind of forgot it had a boss health bar, but it did, which, dude, what's that? Oh, that's my music. I'm silly. I'm a silly gopher. Um, anyway, what was I doing? Right. So yeah, I don't blame you if you don't remember this boss, because it's a boss that very quickly becomes a normal enemy. It does technically have a boss health bar, right? And it's completely optional, and it's kind of one of those enemies that screams, "Come fight me later," right? Or you can do what I did, which seemed the sensible thing: run past it, get all the loot, and leave. Right? I did eventually come back and murder it, and I think it dropped something for the Porgan, the quartz, right? But it wasn't super memorable because of that. And like, frankly, if you're going to shove a boss in a poison swamp, my thoughts on poison swamps are very well known on this point. Heck off! I'm not gonna fight that boss if I don't have to, or I'm gonna come back way later when like its damage is trivial to me, and that's what I did. So, Um, the boss has no real lore besides that, right? There's some hints at it, and again, it just kind of becomes a normal enemy. I think it was some kind of construction puppet. They don't even have a face, man. Like, how does this thing see? And its mechanics are not interesting. It is literally like the trolls from Elden Ring, where they just kind of stomp, right? So this guy, I kind of want to put him in. That sure was a boss, but he's like, that sure was a boss was, they did their job, but they're mid, right? This guy didn't even really do that in my eyes. This guy is outclassed by mini bosses. Boop. Outclassed by mini bosses. Alright. Ah, yes. I should look ahead with my pictorial examples. This is what I actually remember of the fight. This is what my camera looked like the entire fight. Not very well done. Like, it's barely even a boss. Alright, so we move on. Check ahead of time. We move on to Forge Master Fuego. Now, this might have been the first boss that really gave me trouble, I think. Like, yeah, I'm looking at the bosses I've looked at so far, and this was where Lies of P really felt like it was throwing hands for the first time. And it was a good point for that kind of difficulty spike as well. It was right before you unlocked Vanini as a helpful NPC, right? And Vanini increases your personal power quite a bit because he allows you to customize the arm. He opens up his puppet shop. He does a couple other things too. He translates the ciphers, which allows you to get blah 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 blah, right? So like this was your gateway to unlocking Vanini, right? And so kind of like the shock puppet, not the shock puppet, the Watchman, right? Fuego also makes great use of the overheat status effect as well, and like even if it doesn't do a lot of status effect damage, by giving a boss a status effect, these things are already punching you to the moon, right? So even the status effect is just automatically difficulty up, right? I will talk about more on that later. It's typically not a bad thing, right? Especially if it's not like every attack the boss has. And that's important with Fuego. Like, not every attack did overheat. It was just the attacks that made sense to overheat. And I really liked Fuego's broad spectrum of attacks. Like, he would do rapid attacks, he would do like a charging punch, he would shoot you with the gun, he would put little oil patches on the ground. That was probably the most butt clenching maneuver he did. And then would do like massive AoEs. He had such a nice variety. Unfortunately, the lore of this boss was kind of like meh, and also very much overshadowed by learning about Vanini and his puppet, right? And visually, I mean, it's a walking furnace, which is cool. It fits Lies of P's aesthetic very well, but it kind of loses the wow factor that like the Watchman has, right? And so far, most of the Lies of P bosses have been the Watchmen, which is really really cool, and just kind of dudes. So I really would have liked something a bit more visually impressive, but everything else about everything, this boss is just really solid. I don't want to put it in we were so close because basically it had to do it didn't do everything great, but did everything solid. So that's not what I wanted to do. We're gonna make another tier here. Uh-huh. Whoops. Make sure I'm editing the correct tier. Alright, we're gonna call this one, let's see here. We're gonna call this Proud Souls Bosses. An excellent addition to the Souls-like roster of things that kick your ass. Nothing special about Fuego. Nothing worth like singing praises about, but there's nothing to complain about. He's just a solid dude, right? All right. Now we're going to introduce a character that will have a whole new tier to them. It will allow me to introduce a whole nother tier. This is the Atoned, who I did not know was someone you could even fight. You meet the Atoned right before you're, I think it's as you're going to that horrible village with the carcasses, right? Yes. And they ask if that's what you're doing, if you're going that direction. And of course, because it's lies of P and it has pushed you towards the lie mechanic as the correct thing to do, I lied. And they let me through, and that was the end of it, right? That was it. That was all. Done, right? But in that second playthrough I mentioned, where I was doing my the advanced build, the other intention of that playthrough was to pick the opposite of every choice I had picked in my original playthrough. So of course, I told the truth to this guy, and he fought you, right? And yeah, you learned a bit about him by killing him and reading his stuff. He's called the Atoned because he did some bad stuff, failed his friends, and wanted to atone by making sure no one went to that awful village ever again, of which he was thwarted by me lying to them. So he's not doing his job very well. And so I don't want to put this guy in even like stalker drip tier because his drip's not that good. I mean, like, I've never been the bulldog guy, and as far as like tattered cloaks go, there's way better in Lies of P, right? In fact, way better that you have by this point. So we're gonna put a tier above this one. Admiral above. We'll change this to blue. I'm gonna change this to a more depressing blue, actually, because it's so low. Make this green, 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 and we're gonna call this. Wait, I could fight them? Wait, I could fight them? And that's where the Atone goes. I didn't even know I could fight them. Okay. And now we go to ba-da-da-da, Archbishop or High Bishop or whatever, Andreas. Man, I think this boss was like mechanically the Fueco was the boss where I really started to like feel like, yo, this is a Souls game mechanically, right? The Archbishop here is where I really started to feel like I was playing a Souls game thematically. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the aesthetic of the puppets in Lies of P. That's kind of what drew me to the game, outside from the weapon customization. And the appearance of the carcasses were shocking, right? Like, I did not expect my puppet apocalypse game to also be a zombie apocalypse game, right? That was something I was not prepared for. And so, leading up to Andreas, fighting all those carcasses, and then fighting Andreas, right, was like, holy crap, this is so many levels of no, right? And while his lore personally isn't that interesting, classic church, high level in the church, greedy for power, bliggity bloggity blue, right? Um, the lore you learn tertiarily to him is very important. He kind of introduces you to the cult, the idea of a cult worshipping the carcasses or the carcass transformation, briefly getting into the connection between the carcasses and the petrification disease, which is really important at that point, right? Because for whatever reason, nobody seems to know that the final standpoint of the petrification disease is carcasses, zombies, right? And like this is definitely like peak gross and weird territory. But like I will always remember Archdeacon as Britt Dreas as the boss where I fought two butts, right? Because like you start off fighting a horrible bug Andreas, and then he flips over and his butt becomes actual Andreas. But then you can still fight the other face, but that's upside down and it's become his new butt. So he's the boss of two butts. And like the silliness of that did somewhat, and don't get me wrong, that's my fault, right? It's not the designer's fault. But the silliness of that did somewhat hurt the gravity of the encounter. Also, while he did freak me out, uh, the fight itself was nothing special, right? Didn't play around with the carcass status effect, which is probably for the best actually, because that early you had no real defenses against acid, right? Corrosion rather. But nothing he really brought to the table was new outside of being big and weirdly shaped. He was just freaky, right? Let's see. That said, where do I put him? Gosh, I think he's too solid just from everything else to be that sure was a boss. So I'm gonna put him. He's a Proud Souls boss. Like he didn't do anything great, but he did everything right. Right? Maybe I need a tier below Proud Souls boss. We'll see. We'll work on it. Didn't I make Stalker Drip tier blue? I meant to. You're blue. There, Stalker Drip tier is blue. All right. Um. All right. So next on the list, ooh, okay, okay, all right, okay. Um, uh, that was weird. The Black Rabbit Brotherhood, round one. This is called the Black Rabbit Brotherhood Eldest, technically. Man, I am super torn on this fight. Because on the one hand, I genuinely really like the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, right? I think their characters are really interesting. I think learning about them and them harrying you as you go through their lair is really fun. I thought learning about them in Overture was also really cool. Like, they always presented themselves as a family, but we really get the details of that as we play through Overture, right? So, like, from a style perspective, a from a style perspective, and from a like aesthetic perspective, I really do like this boss fight. I like these characters, right? And it's the correct level of challenge for where it appears in the game. However, the challenge ekes on frustrating, and this is where my problems come in. Because I think from a design perspective, the fight is not well made. I think it's about now, I won't say it's about as well made as it could have been, right? Because of a different boss fight we'll talk about later, right? But it's worth noting that any boss fight where you consistently fight more than one target, especially if it's a full 3D game with a lock-on mechanic, multi-target boss fights are always going to be somewhat frustrating. They do their best to mitigate this, right? Um, the younger siblings don't do near as much damage as you think they would. I think they even hit less impactfully, especially the littlest sister, than like normal mobs, right? And while there's a sibling present, the big brother also is less aggressive, right? So they mitigate the fact that multi boss fights are hell, but what this turns into then is a very distracting stamina match where your attention is really frayed, pulled between the eldest and whatever sibling is there at the time. And it's not a fight where there's like multiple answers to it. Because if you just try and focus down the eldest, you will get swarmed. And even though the little siblings don't do much damage, they do still flinch you, which leaves you open for Big Brother to murderize you, right? And so it's a very frustrating thing that is both a stamina match and a damage check. And so I think from a design perspective, this fight kind of drops the ball. I think everything else about it is great. I think the Black Rabbit Brotherhood is what I would perfectly call the we were this close to greatness tier. Like, it is so much going for it, but the fight itself, just because of how frustrating it was not very fun for me, right? Uh, and so we're gonna put them below the Scrapper Watchman. Um, Now I managed to yuck up one of the images, so give me a moment. Uh, Fortunately, I couldn't really find a high-res image, so bear with me here. But the White Lady. I think this might be the first human and first stalker enemy. I guess except for the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, but they're a bit different. That I put outside of Stalker Drift here, right? First and foremost, because she doesn't just have her weapons moveset. Up until this point, the Survivor and the Mad Donkey just were just worse than P, right? Because they had the weapon they were wielding, they had that move set, and okay, the quality still looks good. That's good then. But yeah, they had the weapons move set, but they didn't have P's arm or shenanigans, so they were just worse than P, right? This girl didn't have P's arm or shenanigans, but she did have her own tricks. And she was the only boss slipperier than her up until this point was the youngest of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, who hopped around and bounded around. But this is a one-on-one fight where you could genuinely feel overwhelmed by the speed of the White Lady. And that also gave her a really interesting weakness in the sense that her weapon was fairly easy to break. So it kind of teaches you that the flimsier weapons, if you're getting overwhelmed, you can try and break their weapon. And then after that point, like, she doesn't hit hard enough to really worry about her. Like, she'll still flinch you and stuff, but you can just block everything she does. Don't even have to perfect block it, right? Once you've blown the weapon. And I think that's a really interesting weakness and an excellent way to kind of like force introduce you, like, yo, if you have been sleeping on perfect blocks up until this point, stop it. Stop it, it's really good. And I won't say she did this by herself, but like it's definitely part of the reason that I'm inspired to eventually do a playthrough of Lies of P where I will not progress in the game until I have broken a boss's weapon. I'm not allowed to kill a boss without breaking their weapon. Is kind of the challenge I want to put forth to myself. Um, but yeah, so mechanically, she's probably the coolest stalker we've had so far. Drip, I mean, look at her. Look at that mask. Like, I'm not a huge fan of white on white. I never have been, but that mask is sick. And because of the lore behind the color choices, I can't really argue with it too much, right? Um, right. So she's very solid mechanically. She gives you really cool drip, but the lore that you learn about her in two parts, right? You learn about her relationship to her sister, the singer, and not only that, but the fact that she actually sabotaged the voice of her sister and is racked by guilt. Her sister doesn't even know she still loves her, right? And cares about her. And so she is out there risking her life in the name of her sister. And I'm a sucker for an atonement story, right? And forgive me, the proper names of all the characters have vanished. It has been a year since I played base game Lies of P. Please excuse me. So yeah, the White Lady. Oh goodness, 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 goodness. I might need another tier. Actually, no, no. Yeah, I think she can go in Proud Souls bosses. Put her above Fall. I'll put her above the Bishop. I don't know if I put her above. Nah, I think I put her above it. Yeah, she's not this close to greatness because, like, again, the Stalker enemies will always have like she had a real hard. She felt like a bump in the road, difficulty wise, and I'm sorry to say that, but it is just the way it is. Like most of the stalker bosses, and this is something they happily rectified in Overture with the stalker bosses in that game, do just kind of fall flat. They feel like bumps in the road. They feel more like story bosses than they do mechanical fights, and that's okay, right? If the stalkers were super threatening, the city would not be overrun with puppets and carcasses. So yeah, she's doing a good job. I like her. Mm. All right, blah. Taking a drink there. Next up is the Mad Clown Puppet. I forgot this guy existed. I legitimately did. Um, yeah. I forgot. I like when I looked at this tier list and found him. I remembered he existed, but I forgot. I still didn't. I'm like, wait, he had a boss bar. Like when I talk about bump in the road, like that's all this guy literally was. Like he showed up, threw a flaming boulder at you, and then was annoying. I treated him more like an elite enemy than I did a boss, right? And I think he was like the puppet of the future in the sense that you eventually fought enemies that just had his moveset later. I'm not gonna waste much time on him. Um, we're going to put him in outclassed by mini bosses. We'll put him above the puppet of the future because at least his design is somewhat interesting. But yeah, just the Mad Clown puppet. I guess he existed. Yeah, I can't argue with the fact that he definitely existed. Yep, sure did. Oh, hello, J Doodle. Welcome. You have come. Gosh, you must have a sixth sense. You have come at the perfect time. Because as we stroll past the mud and the muck that is the Mad Clown puppet, we come to the absolute glory that is the Puppet King. Now, um, I would show a video here of just the intro to his fight because it's so important. Oh my goodness. The intro to his fight is so damn important. But I didn't prepare for that, and also I don't know how Twitch would see that, so I'm not going to worry about it, right? But I can basically recite the intro from memory. You first encounter the Puppet King as he puts on a play for you, right? And this play looks like one thing and turns out to be another. It's actually fantastically well done. It's a play that shows Geppetto taking out Pinocchio's heart, uh, P's heart, right, and putting his heart in another puppet, who then gets up and takes a stance that J Doodle actually pointed out to me was a stance signifying like the connection between man and God, with one hand raised towards God and one hand lowered towards man. Yes, art iconography. And after that, did the Puppet King appear? Now, when you first see that, because you lack literally all forms of context, it's very easy to assume, and this is what I assumed, right, that this was a representation of Geppetto taking Carlo, like the human boy in which P was based off of, and whose ergo is used in his fuel, right? Geppetto's son, taking Carlo's heart and putting it in P, right? Putting it in Pinocchio. That is what it is easy to assume, right? However, we learn later in the game that that's not what happened, what it was at all. But with that frame of mind, it when the king introduces himself, it's like he's saying you're the bridge between man and puppet, between man and deity. Let us join forces. Which of course you reject because P doesn't understand any of this and does not give a shit. He is here for violence and nothing else, right? But you learn later that what is actually happening here is the Puppet King is warning you. He cannot disobey orders from Geppetto. not directly, but he does have the will to rebel. And what he is showing you is Geppetto's plan. His plan to take P's heart and put it in the nameless puppet. Which, if you do not become human enough, that is what happens, and you can say nothing about it. He's trying to warn you. He's trying to help you. And so the crying motion he does when you reject him is not mockery like it first appears. He's him showing you through layers, because he cannot literally talk to you. Geppetto has prevented him from doing that. That he is saddened by your rejection of him. Then it goes into the first phase of the fight where you fight the Puppet King. And while the Puppet King isn't terribly special as far as a boss fight goes, it is incredibly well designed. It is telegraphed in a way that makes the fight dangerous and lethal, but while but easily executable, right? Like once you learn how to guard against all of his attacks, the Puppet King is not terribly threatening, and that is a good thing, and it's actually a really good way to design a first phase as kind of like a warm up. It's a good thing that the Puppet King isn't crazy threatening, because holy crap, Romeo. Romeo, King of Puppets, was my first wall. I think I spent a solid like a solid whole stream bashing my face against Romeo. I think like the latter half of one stream and the first half of another was just me dedicated to fighting Romeo over and over again. And Romeo is he fights like a stalker, but because he's a puppet and because he's a proper boss, he doesn't flinch. And on top of that, he's got flame going around. He's got some really sick moves. Like this is definitely, even more than the other stalkers, the most proficient human-shaped fighter we've ever seen. And he also, without being like cheap about it, is very difficult to defend against, largely because of the shape of his weapon. He does a thing where he puts it behind you and pulls it forward, and you can't really block that. You have to dodge it, right? But it's also not like as crippling as being grabbed, right? Now, of course, besides his boss fight just being awesome and really well designed, Romeo, of course, is one of the most important figures in this entire story, and you are given that in dribbles, in trickles, and even more so in Overture, where you learn that Romeo was in fact a stalker and Carlo's best friend, right? And that he was basically fighting P against his will, trying to awaken Carlo. And Romeo, even before I learned that Geppetto murdered him basically to create the King of Puppets, uh, and experiment with puppets with ego. Even before that, Romeo was such a tragic figure, and he's the primary reason I wanted to murder Geppetto with my own two hands, right? And so, like, I think I've led up to this strongly enough. But the King of Puppets is the whole package, man. He is the perfect level of difficulty without being frustrating. He has fantastic design and visuals. He has amazing lore and story behind him. I don't think I'm exaggerating to say that Romeo is one of the best designed, if not the best designed, boss fights in Lies of P, and maybe just Souls-likes in general. I have no problem putting Romeo, the King of Puppets, in absolute cinema. Like, just this is what a a boss fight should be. Like, you can't make every boss fight that. Yeah, I knew when I came to Romeo I was gonna gush about it. He's so good. He's so good. Like, he's genuinely one of my favorite boss fights in like any game, not just Lies of P. They did so well, and and at least from a mechanical perspective, like he's not the last boss fight I'm gonna gush about, right? But I think we are going to peak early. I think the King of Puppets is going to reign at the top of absolute cinema. We'll see if I change my mind going forward. But the next boss fight is going to be none other than. Hold on. Let me drink some water and see if I can't do this impression. Ugh. You better get ready for the champion. Y'all aren't ready for the smackdown of Victor, the champion of the ring. Yeah, I saw this guy and immediately thought of Bane meets Hulk Hogan. And I was not disappointed by that first impression. That's basically what he is Bane meets Hulk Hogan. Um, gosh, his first phase, the image of him on the right, where like he's got wire dreadlocks going on, is is so dorky. Like out of context, heck, even in context, I thought it was a little weird. I assume Brock Lesnar is some WWE reference that I don't get. But I'm going to assume it's accurate. Um, Mechanically, I don't remember much of Victor, right? He's got some good alluding to him, and he does have important lore tied to him. Leading up to Victor is where we learn about, like, why the hell, where we learn that the petrification disease isn't just this natural phenomena. It is something cultivated and encouraged and in fact sought out by the faction of the alchemists. So Victor is important from a storyline perspective just because he is our introduction to the alchemist. In fact, right before we fight Victor, no, after we fight Victor, after we kill Victor, we meet Simon, who's of course one of the most important villainous figures in this game, second perhaps only to Geppetto. But as for Victor himself and his fight, I'm not going to call him bad. I think I'm going to call him a solid Souls boss, right? Or maybe, you know what? You know what? Lore and foreshadowing can't carry him. We're going to put him in. That sure was boss. Oh, hello, Kaladin. What was that about? Did you wake up from a nightmare, buddy? But yeah, we'll put him above the Parade Master, but that's that's all I can say about him, man. Like, he's better than Parade Master. All right. Just looking ahead to make sure I've got all my pictures and they're working as they should. All right, here we have our next stalker fight. The Owl Doctor. Yeah, Owl Doctor. That's his technical name. Screw Geppetto. Yeah, all my friends hate Geppetto. Yes, an owl. In fact, I think no. This is technically the second bird mask you can get in the game because the White Lady's mask depicts a swan. But swans are kind of douchebags, so owl. Yeah, no. Owl Doctor has some absolutely good drip. He is also maybe one of the easiest bosses to miss in the game. I almost missed him, as a matter of fact. In fact, I don't think I actually encountered him when I first went through his area. I think I backtracked to get some collectibles I missed and stumbled upon the Owl Doctor. That said, there's really nothing else to him. Like, he is a stalker fight. He has nothing else going for him. His lore's not terribly interesting, but bro is definitely carried by his drip. Swans are nature going, boy, geese were mean. What if we took those and made them brawlers? And pretty. They're like... Swan are like the swole femboys of the geese world, is what they are. But yeah, so, Owl Doctor is basically just carried by his drip, and so fittingly, he's going to go in Stalker Drip tier right above Mad Donkey. Nothing else really more to say. Ooh. But then. One moment. Again, kind of clicking ahead here. Ba-ba-ba-ba. The Green Monster of the Swamp. The Green Monster of the Swamp is where Lies of P decided to remind us that it was also kind of a horror game, right? The Presentation of this boss is kind of top notch for a boss that it looks horrible. God, if you say so. But yeah, the presentation of this boss is so well done, from like a horror perspective, right? You go through its entire area, seeing signs of the green swamp monster, finding people leaving notes about this horrid thing, right? You get dribbles of the terror and the fierceness of the green swamp monster, and like visually it lives up to that. It's this mass of like, gosh, this is Tangela if Pokemon wanted to scar children, right? And it also has these like weird brackish, barnacles on it. Its scythe arm, right? And then of course, like the coolest and most memorable part about the Swamp Monster's design, in my opinion, is when we learn it's a hermit crab. Midway through the fight, it crawls into, I think that's one of the Parade Master puppets, and starts, well, puppeteering it. Its face reminded me of Groot. I always see it as a hermit crab because, like, again, once it takes hold of the puppet, it's got those eye stalks coming out of it. And so, like, this answers a lot of the questions that were leading up to it when we were getting those dribbles of information about its existence and why it was so mysterious. Is that it would literally like trapdoor spider people by hiding inside deactivated puppets because it was in like a puppet graveyard, and then puppeteering those puppets, how many times can I say puppet in a sentence, to then murderize people, right? This is a really cool reveal. It was a really good boss, and it did make me glad I was not playing an advanced build, because I'm like, oh my god, is this weak to fire or electricity? I don't know. Does it count as a puppet or a carcass or both or neither? What the hell, right? But it didn't matter because I was just bonking it. That said, I think where this boss really shines is actually its difficulty. Coming out of the King of Puppets and having a couple like less memorable bosses immediately after, the Green Swamp Monster was just the right level of difficulty. It kicked my ass, like genuinely kicked my ass, but I never felt like I was having my ass kicked unfairly. It was a combination of it just having a varied and a diverse and threatening moveset, while also being the first boss to really threaten you with the. It's not acid. It's not corruption. Corrosion, with the corrosion debuff, and corrosion's so rude. Like, it's not Scarlet Rot, but it's close, right? And so between the status effect, between the two phases, and just how different the movesets are, like, some of those, I think some of the harder bosses, double phase bosses, are the ones that have drastic changes in their movesets, kind of like Romeo does. And I think that's good boss design. I really do. And it also shows work, because a lot of times, like, phase 2 of a boss is just, yo, we don't want to have a whole ass new asset for this boss. So, it's going to just be the same but more threatening. The Green Swamp Monster really felt like two different bosses. And so, for a boss that didn't have a terrible amount of story outside of like its lore, goodness, do I put the Green Swamp Monster in Absolute Cinema? Hmm. Yeah, I can't think of an aspect in which the Green Swamp Monster was lacking. Uh, it's not my favorite monster aesthetically, but it just kind of has everything. Yeah, no, I'm pretty good with that. It's nowhere near Romeo, right? But I think it belongs there. Definitely one of my favorite boss fights. And after that, we're gonna come way down and have another boss I forgot existed. Goodness, what are you even called again? Robber Weasel? Robber Weasel. Meet Robber Weasel, everybody. It's like a scarecrow, but a ferret, as far as I can tell. And again, like, I couldn't find a great res of the actual boss, presumably because no one cared. So this is just P wearing its outfit. And, like, man, I think this is actually the worst Stalker so far. Like, I don't remember their story at all. I barely remember their fight. They literally mugged you at the subway. And their drip is just... I see what they were going for. It didn't work. I don't even remember what weapon they used, right? Like, a lot of the Stalkers have fairly memorable weapons, but, like, not him. Him and the Owl, I don't recall. I don't recall. Gosh, I'm not even sure I want to put him in Stalker drip tier. I think... Alright. I think we're gonna give him the worst rating I can give anything in a video game. Forgettable. Yep. Forgettable. Really nothing going for him. Maybe outclassed by mini bosses? Nah, I'm pretty okay with forgettable. Like, I at least remembered fighting these two after I looked at their images, right? I don't like I remember fighting them, but I don't remember what fighting them was like. Yeah, it's worth noting that I don't care a great deal for any of the Stalker fights with that are just like because mechanically there's no real difference between them. Like I really think that the Stalker fights were them like saving assets, if nothing else, right? Maybe there's more to it than that. And again, like most of the Stalker fights are also very lore important. But if you don't got lore and you don't got drip, you failed as a Stalker fight, and that's where the robber weasel is. Oh, somebody's throwing stuff. All right, Walker of Illusions. Um, This is another guy that I forgot existed until the tier list brought him up. I do remember fighting him, but like I remember using him as a sandbag for trying out new weapons for a while, right? And I remember him being very frustrating to fight. Not difficult, but frustrating. He had a quick humanoid moveset without the ability to be flinched, right? Which kind of puts him above stalkers. But his movement was so jagged and samey that it was so hard to actually tell what attack he was doing. So goodness gracious, yeah, I just didn't like him. Ooh, And like I want to pull out more specific examples of like why I don't like him, but I don't remember a lot. And again, it has been a year since I played Lies of P and the base game, so like a lot of the bosses that didn't stand out are gonna feel like that. But I think that guy goes with the Robber Weasel. I really do. Like, above or below? He's above because he's at least got not a stalker moveset. But like he wasn't fun, he wasn't memorable, he doesn't have any lore to him, wasn't mechanically interesting, just nothing going for him. Right? Like, nah, nah. They can't all be winners. By definition, they cannot all be winners. Alright. I'm gonna keep this one quick. Corrupted Parade Master. This is just the Parade Master, but carcassed. He's all carcassed up. And that's it. That's what this is. This is the Parade Master robot. Like, instead of a decapitated head, he's got a jellyfish head, and he's wielding another puppet for a club. I remember him being fairly challenging in like not a frustrating way, right? But he's got no real story. The only reason this guy felt at all threatening was because of where he appeared in the story. He showed up pounding on the door to Hotel Krat. So there's this like in-story reason for you to like really want to kill it. But it's more of an urgency thing than anything. So like he goes He's gonna go with the Parade Master, above Parade Master, below Champion Victor. That sure was a boss. Okay, so I think we're done striking out for a bit. That said, I'm not gonna have a terrible amount more to say about this next boss because it's the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. Round 2, fight. It is the Black Rabbit Brotherhood fight. However, they do have a couple of important twists. And it's worth noting that, like, everything I said about the Black Rabbit Brotherhood still stands about the round 2 Brotherhood fight. It's jarring because you're fighting multiple opponents. It can be frustrating, but there's 2 points about the Black Rabbit Brotherhood round 2 that stand out. One, okay, there's 3 points. There's 3 points. One, you murder them all. This is the death of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, right? 2, each of the younger siblings now comes with a hot and spicy status effect. And 3, the first phase of the fight is fighting all the younger siblings at once. And that's really the only difference. Like, you fight all the younger siblings at once, but once you weaken them enough, they skedaddle, you fight the older brother, and then they take turns and you murder them, right? It is Black Rabbit Brotherhood round 2, and that's really all there is to it. And that's no means a bad thing. Like I said, everything positive for the Black Rabbit Brotherhood still stands here. I think the only complaint I have about this fight is not necessarily the fight itself, but the way itemization works in Lies of P, right? Lies of P, up until you get to Overture, is very much a specialized game of defenses, right? You have 4 different defensive items you can equip. 1 is just generalized defense. 2 target specific status effects. And the 3rd targets a specific damage type. Now, you can't itemize against the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. The eldest does strike damage. The guy on the left does slash. The other 2 do piercing. So that's pointless. And they do electric. Each of the younger siblings do electric shock, acid, and fire. So because you can only itemize against one of those status effects at a time, you can't really defend against them that way either. You are always leaving yourself open, right? So they are a very frustrating boss fight to face from an itemization standpoint. And late game Lies of P itemization is very important, right? Because you are basically swapping around your defensive items to counter the boss you are currently fighting, especially in regards to status effects. Because if you... The late game bosses of Lies of P are... They have so much status buildup, if they have a status, that you really, really need to build against it, right? So I think, but the way it stands, like, Lies of P doesn't have a way to do that at this point in the game. You don't get the Omni defensive tools till you go to Overture, and for good reason. They're very strong. So I think I will put them below the original Black Rabbit Brotherhood, right? Just because they lost their charm, they lost their challenge, but it's still a solid boss fight in isolation. But the ways they made it interesting just made it frustrating without making it actually that much more difficult. But yeah, so that's all I've got to say about them, unfortunately. Still love the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, so they're still up there, right? And now we're gonna go back down. Alright, this is the Door Guard. And this is what the Door Guard looks like, but now I'm going to show you the real boss of this fight. It's right here, this little bar. So, for most status effects, in Dark Souls, and for half of the status effects, over half of status effects in Lies of P, How it works is when you are struck by the status effect, you get a bar that fills up, kind of like a reverse damage meter, right? When it goes to full, you are now under that status effect. So if you take overheat damage and your overheat bar fills, you're now affected by overheat, which reduces your defenses and gives you a dot, right? You will gradually lose overheat and can't gain more, and when it empties, you go back into this cycle. And that's how most of the status effects work and how they should work. Shock and its cousin Break are different. If this bar is filled up at all, like not completely filled, like if you have 5% of this bar, you are technically afflicted by shock, right? And shock is a really debilitating debuff that does something like halves or cuts by 3/4 or something your stamina generation. And if you don't have stamina in a Souls-like game, you just kind of die. And this boss, the Door Guard, every single attack he does builds up shock. Even if you block an attack, it still builds up shock. Not as much, but it still builds it up. And it doesn't matter because 5% is the same as 100. Take another drink. So if you ever do anything but dodge or perfect block, you're getting afflicted by shock, right? And like in theory, as I just mentioned, since you know this is what you're going to be facing, you can itemize against it. But again, that doesn't actually matter with shock. Because what happens when you itemize against a status effect is it takes more for that status effect to actually activate. It takes more for that bar to fill up, right? But again, if you have any shock, you are under that status effect. It doesn't matter, right? So it's just a status effect that you're basically under for that entire fight, or you just play a no-hit run. And that's about the only way to really beat the Door Guard is to do a no-hit run, because shock is that debilitating. And that's the only reason the Door Guard is memorable or even worth talking about, in my opinion. Right? Like, the boss itself is just kind of a big enemy. But because everything it does shocks you, shock is the real boss of the fight. In fact, I'm going to rearrange my tier list a bit here, right? Because this really deserves. I think outclassed by mini bosses still affects these guys, right? Might do this. Yeah, this feels right. And this is going to be hate. Do not like genuinely do not like this boss fight. It doesn't feel like a boss fight. It feels like you forcing me to endure a status effect for like however long it takes me to fight him. It was kind of artificial and badly designed difficulty in my eyes, right? So yeah, I didn't like the Door Guardian. Um, I didn't like him at all. In fact, I think I can confidently say that in the entirety of Lies of P, he's probably my least favorite boss. I'm not even sure I'll put another boss there, if I'm being honest. But let's not waste too much more time on him. We still have a whole Overture to get through, and we're not done with the base game. Alright, I'm counting these two bosses as the same category because they are connected, and you really only end up fighting one if you fight the other. Black Cat and Red Fox are very interesting characters. You encounter them early, and they are both helpful to you and constantly playing tricks on you. They lie to you, they help you fight the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, they steal from you, they swindle you, right? And at the end, it's culminated in an option where you can choose whether or not to help the Black Cat. And I chose not to because I was kind of sick of their shit. And after I fought the Black Cat, I then fought the Red Fox because I murdered her friend, right? And I killed her too. And after that, you learn from the lore of both their gear that simultaneously the Black Cat was actually like faking a large part of his illness to the Red Fox to get sympathy from her and to swindle her. but they also both had genuine affection for one another, right? It was kind of a familial bond in a horrible world, right? So they're two, but also both very tragic figures. I really like their story. I really like the presence that they have in the game, and both characters have some amazing drip. Like if I had gotten his mask earlier, I probably would have rocked Black Cat's mask for quite a bit of the game, right? That said, I can think of nothing interesting to say about the fights themselves. They are just stalkers, and I will put them where appropriate. Um, in fact, you know what? I will put them above Survivor in Stalker Drip tier. That's really all I can say about them. I wish I could say more. I really wish the Stalkers in base game Lies of P were more interesting. Okay, now Laxasia the Complete. Ooh, okay. There have been there's been a lot of me like I hit Romeo and then like I started bashing on so many of the Lies of P bosses, but Laxia is where it all comes back, baby. Laxia is like I'm just gonna spoil this right now. Laxia is uh definitely in the peak cinema tier. Like she shows up Thor style, calls lightning to her weapon, and even does the superhero landing to challenge you to mortal combat. It's super good. You also learn a bit about her leading up to her, as Lies of P does. You learn about most bosses. She's uh, terminally loyal to Manus and the Alchemists. She's one of their special projects. Basically, Loxia is probably the closest any alchemist is to achieving their dream of like the perfection of humanity. Scratchy throat. Like I said, talking for 2 straight hours. Yeah, Luxasia is the closest they have to the pinnacle of humanity. And in her first fight, in her first phase rather, she's pretty like she kind of fights like a stalker fight, but like I wish the stalker fights would go. She is human-sized, fairly fast, very threatening, and but doesn't like flinch easily. She staggers more easily than like the colossal-sized bosses, but it's not a punch and she buckles, right? She doesn't have that portion of being a stalker, right? She's got a little bit of lightning going on, but something that's interesting is like if you break her weapon, you actually break the shield. And that's apparent as to why, because in phase two, whoo boy. Um First of all, if it weren't for the fact that the carcasses look really pallid and gross, she'd be pretty attractive, right? Very, very muscle mommy energy going on here. Second of all, at this point, any pretense of not being Thor is gone. You're fighting Thor. And she whoops your ass so hard with a weapon so cool you can't even get it. Very sad story. Gosh, I think Loxia might be one of the bosses it took me the most attempts to fight. She was really, really rough. But she never felt unfair. Like, I knew how to dodge her crazy lightning attacks, but the execution was tricky, consecutive, and needed good timing. She was also relentless. There's a couple enemies in Lies of P I would describe that way. Romeo's one of them, where they never want to stop being aggressive, and in fact, it feels like they get personally offended when you attempt to sharpen your weapon. Luxasia and Romeo both behaved like that, and that made them pretty hard. Like, if I didn't have the ability where the special grindstone also got some of my weapon uh, durability back, Luxasia would have been so much more painful. Especially because you only get a limited amount of the quick repair tools, which running out of those against Romeo was also painful. But yeah, Loxasia, I think I can, with very due confidence, put her in absolute cinema. Um, she's got a cool character. I always love like the noble knights, and that she very much feels that way. And as far as like fun factor goes, she has a boss fight that's up there. I still think nothing takes Romeo. I don't think anything will genuinely take Romeo. Um, but she's one of the closest. She's definitely one of the closest, right? And we're gonna move right along to the man she simped over, Simon Manus. Now, Mr. Manus here, I really didn't find that engaging. Like, I'm gonna be honest. He felt like a, I won't say bump in the road, right? But after Luxasia, bro was a pushover, right? It was very clear that this guy was more a scientist than a fighter. Totally simpable, can't you see it? You realize the second picture is also him. But yeah, um, gosh, yeah, he was a total pushover, right? Like still challenging, like still like end game boss material. Yes, I definitely detected the sarcasm. End game boss material, but like after Luxasia, dude was just I flattened him, right? I think he took me 3 tries, which is kind of rookie numbers in a Souls-like game. He has, of course, a lot of really important story and lore going on with him. He's Simon Manus. He's hinted at for, he's alluded to and foreshadowed for the second half of the game, and kind of gets his simped over even more in Overture, despite him not being involved at all. We learn a lot about him in Overture. Um, I think the most interesting thing about his boss fight was the super explosion where they recreate the painting. Oh, J Doodle probably knows. J Doodle, do you know the name of the painting where it's like Adam and God touching fingers? Do you know the name of that painting? I'm waiting for it. Stream delay. She's probably googling it. But yeah, it's the one that's sealing the Sistine Chapel. He basically has that moment in his second phase where he reaches up with his hand and this giant ass glowing hand descends from the sky to touch tips with him. To get the spelling right. Um, and that creates a big explosion. But that's the only memorable part about his fight. Otherwise, he's just big dude that hits you with big club. And like the club was really easy to dodge. And again, it really doesn't help that this guy comes right after Luxasia, so it's like you had me fight Muscle Stripper Thor and go into cardiac arrest Mr. Hyde. He's just gonna feel bad, right? And like he the worst part I think about Manus is that depending on the ending you're going for, he is your final boss, right? If you don't have the humanity to go to get any ending but the one, or you choose to just let Geppetto have your heart, he's your last boss. And so ah, I'm not gonna say he was outclassed by many bosses. I'll put him in that sure was a boss, right? He sure was a boss. He did his job. Makes me so happy that they're pulling Renaissance church iconography with some of these bosses. Does it really surprise you after Romeo? Like, these guys know their stuff. I'm sure there's like tons of other things that I just don't get because I'm not cultured enough. Right? Alright, so we finally made it to the end of base game. The final boss of Lies of P, if you're not a wussy, is the Nameless Puppet. Want me to smack you with culture? I've still got to get through Overture. We'll take a rain check. So, the Nameless Puppet, there's not much to say about him on a lore story perspective, right? You kind of learn about this right at the end, where this is the body that Geppetto wants to put Carlo's new heart in right? This is going to be his new indestructible, perfect boy killing machine, right? And then you fight it, and it's about to stab you, but it's about to stab you through your heart, and Geppetto takes it through the heart for you. The boss fight itself is really solid. Like, I have no complaints mechanically about this boss fight. It felt like a final boss should. No tricks. It was fast, unrelenting, savage, and lethal. There was no cheese on my end or its. It was just an ass kicking over and over again, right? It was a well fit final boss, right? That said, like it compared to like Loxasia and even like Simon, there's like not a lot going on under the hood here. Is just a boss, right? I'm not gonna put it in that sure was a boss tier. Also, I do want to say the visual of its second form, where you slice the top of its head off and it goes nuts, is insanely visceral. Really well done with that visual, and I also loved that in this game where everything's puppets or well zombies, the final boss's weapon is a pair of scissors. Like I think that's just really cool design choices. Um, so I'm gonna put the nameless puppet. I think I'm gonna put it at the top of Proud Soul's boss. Like it has nothing to be ashamed of. It does a really good job, but I don't think it would be that crazy memorable if it weren't for the fact that it was the last boss. You know, it was challenging for sure, right? But it wasn't even like close to greatness. It needed more presence that it just didn't have. And frankly, it was also kind of uggo, which like, okay, Geppetto, this is the body you want to put your kid in. Gosh, every time I talk about Geppetto, he's just a worse father. You know what I mean? All right. So that's the end of base game. I'm going to drink some more water. The Overture bosses are a bit fresher in my mind because I didn't fight them a year ago. So we're going to start with the first boss. Blah, 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 blah. This is the Tyrannical Predator. It is a Jurassic era accurate alligator slash crocodile. I I don't know which. Jidu could probably tell me. And here's a bit better picture of like the whole body of the Tyrannical Predator. Sarcosuchus. Fair enough. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like this boss was kind of mid. And I don't mean that in like a derogatory way, I guess. It is it felt exactly like what fighting a giant alligator should look like. It was big, it was low to the ground, it was super dangerous, had big chompy moves, and could in fact death roll you. Right? It did everything an alligator boss, crocodile boss, Sarcosuchus boss should do. Right? I'm not gonna take that away from it. But it would have been way more interesting if they had warped the story to make it so the named crocodile that was framed for the murder of a dude was the one that turned into a carcass, but that guy got taxidermied, right? Unfortunately, this guy gets put straight into outclassed by mid bosses because there was literally a mid boss right before him that outclassed him, right? This is, gosh, I think it's called the Greater Elephant Carcass. This is a chimera, is what it is, and you can kind of see it. It has the head of an alligator, the neck of the giraffe. It's got several other heads on its neck. There's a hyena, there's a wolf, there's a bear, right? And it's all attached to this elephant body with really stumpy hind legs. And like, this thing fucking horrified me. Not just because of its presence, because, like, okay, it started out as just one of the carcass elephants, which I had fought two of before. They were little, like, elite enemies. It's a not living totem pole. Yeah. But yeah, I had fought one of those, and then suddenly, like a couple of hits into its health bar, I bash its skull open, and out sprouts the chimeric giraffe neck, and everything goes downhill from there. This thing's you fight it in an incredibly small arena. Its attack patterns are really aggressive and basically stretch across the whole arena. And then, because no other reason, because it hates me, I guess, it does the new status effect. It does frost buildup, right? Which luckily frost isn't like shock or break. It's not one of those if you have any status effect, any bar filled, you are affected by this. But it's horrifyingly crippling. Like most frost effects in a game are going to like lower your stamina generation. Frost in Lies of P is even worse. Frost slows your move set. You literally attack and dodge slower while affected by Frost. It's so bad, right? And I spent twice as long bashing my face against this no health bar have an ass than I did against big ol' Sarcosuchus there. So, unfortunately, where I kind of made that tier as a joke, you were literally outclassed by a mini boss. I'm still gonna put you above these guys, though. Just for personal preference reasons. One moment. Okay. And now we're gonna come back to me gushing about sick-ass Lies of P bosses. Because hubba hubba, Marchiona. Marchiona, the woman who almost makes the pallid, gross-ass look of carcasses, hot. Like, not only does this woman have severe Dami Mommy vibes, but she's maybe the most interesting boss mechanically in the entire DLC. Like, I gushed about her a couple weeks ago when I fought her, right? But she might be my favorite duo boss I've ever fought. Like, kind of retracing back to the Black Rabbit Brotherhood thing. The worst part about a duo boss is the idea of like split attention. You are having your focus pulled in two different directions, and if you are ever flanked by them, it's just over. You get hit by one who stuns you, and you get hit by the other, and everything's awful. And I still have traumatic flashbacks from Ornstein and Smo, okay? That doesn't make bosses like that bad, or it doesn't make them impossible to design, but it does make them very frustrating. But Marchiona is proof that there's a way to make it not. Marchiona was so well made. Like, both of these bosses had a hello Tyro no tier with it's a good boss, but screw them anyway. Not really. Like the bosses I like. The bosses I don't. There isn't really a boss that I think is good, but I hate them mostly because you don't get to fight Geppetto, which for the record is the worst part about Lies of P is that you don't get to kill Geppetto yourself. Anyway, Marchiona, the way her fight works, and you have to figure this out is part of why it's cool, right? Nothing tells you this. Is Marchiona and the puppet fight you at the same time. However, they do not typically attack you simultaneously. Guess I want to kill that old man. He killed Romeo. He deserves it. But yeah, only with a couple of attacks do Marchiona and her puppet attack you simultaneously. The way the fight works is when the strings are blue, because she's literally puppeteering her puppet, right? Marchiona is being aggressive. When the strings are red, the puppet is being aggressive, right? And very obviously, it seems like the best way to go would be to ignore the puppet or kill the puppet permanently and then focus Marchiona. But if you kill the puppet, it just starts to heal, and you fight Marchiona one-on-one. But this is actually where it gets interesting. The puppet healing doesn't like drain Marchiona's HP like I thought it did initially, but it does make her moveset a little worse. You get to fight a very focused but very worse version of Marchiona. And if you manage to stun her before she starts healing the puppet, you get some crazy high uptime. So it unlike the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, girl needs her nail trim. Those are strings, but you're correct. Unlike the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, where you're basically forced to kill the younger siblings to have a one-on-one with the eldest, there are multiple ways to approach the Marchiona boss fight. You can just focus Marchiona. You can focus the puppet and then use the downtime to get a bunch of damage on Marchiona. I kind of ended up doing a hybrid of the two. I focused the puppet first, and then I just kind of fought whichever was more opportune to fight. Right? Whichever was aggressive to me was the one I would focus on and fight. And this is good. Bosses should have multiple solutions to beat them, right? A boss should not feel like there's only one answer. A boss should feel like there is multiple answers. How do you answer the boss? So mechanically, Marchiona might overtake Romeo, right? The worst thing I can say about Marchiona is she got so much hype in the zoo, like leading up to her, that it made her seem like she was going to be like one of the last three bosses. She was that big a deal, and she was the second boss. Right? That's the worst thing I can say about her is like all that hype just for an early SmackDown. Right? That said, um, I think I'm gonna put her right below Romeo. Like, I would love to see more duo boss fights like Marchiona. She was so well done. Like, absolutely wonderfully done. Let's see here. Next up, we're going to see a trend in the Overture boss fights, and that is a stalker fight, but it doesn't have the things I don't like about stalker fights. As I mentioned, like the fights with the stalkers are all very samey. You are fighting a player character basically, but without the P arm move set, right? And also they're all very flinchy, right? Hold on, what is her name? Hold. Veronique. Veronique is not like that at all, right? She has her own move set. The worst part about her is I can't get her hammer. Sad face, right? And she's not flinchy at all. She comes at you hard. She comes at you swinging. She has that nice balance of overheat is thrown into her move set, but it's not every attack. In a second phase, I think she gets a little bit of overheat buildup in every attack, but like it's attacks where she like slams the ground, and she is just kind of a human opponent, but she's built very very well. Lore and story wise, I feel like somebody in the team wrote a very cool story about Veronique, and either it happened in base game where I couldn't remember it very well because it's been a year, or it just wasn't divulged very well. You learn a little bit about Veronique and the sweepers going into the freezer, and then you fight her, and you kind of learn a little bit more from talking to the leader of the bastards, but that's it. Her presence could have been so much more, and it wasn't. So I think Veronique is gonna go squarely into. We were this close to greatness. She could have been a she was a great boss fight, but her presence was so weak, right? Speaking of weak presence, the two-faced overseer. Let me pull him up. Oh, this is such a dorky picture I found of him. So the two-faced overseer was hardly alluded to at all. Mind you, there was so much going on in the area where you fight him that's not super surprising. The best thing the two-faced overseer did was introduce you to Alidoro, the goodest of boys, right? Your stalker buddy helping you to kick the alchemist's ass specifically. And like he's got rather than two phases, he's got two modes that he swaps between back and forth, which is a more novel concept than just a normal two-phase boss fight. But like his red mode is the only one that's even remotely threatening. Green mode is kind of a joke. Um that's really all I've got to say on him. Not a lot of lore, really just there to make Alidoro look cool. Was he outclassed by mini bosses? I don't think so. So we're gonna put him in that sure was a boss, and we'll put him above the Parade Master and the Corrupted Blade Master. Victor had more presence than he did. All right. Next up is what is this thing called? Pre-metamorphic Green Hunter. I think this is like the larval version of the green swamp monster. I missed this boss. I didn't know that this boss was a fight I could encounter. I missed it completely. I don't even know where we'd begin looking. I was very thorough in my searchings. So I might have to go back, maybe I'll do it on stream, maybe I won't, and go fight this guy. Um but yeah, he's gonna go into wait, I could fight them here? Cause I just genuinely didn't know I could fight him. Oh, I feel so bad. New tier. Oops. Yeah, basically. Alright. Next up, this is another one that's a name I don't know off the top of my head. Oh, it's so small. Guardian of the Ruins. That's a good enough shorthand for this bastard. So, Guardian of the Ruins. Now, this is a Dark Souls boss, man. Like, and what I mean to say that is this thing is colossal. It is huge. It takes up the really big arena that you fight it in. And like I feel like it has really deep mechanics that I kind of ignored. Cause when you attack its horns on its hands and head, they like light up and then go dim, which I assume does something? Question mark? But like I don't know. I don't know. I just kind of fought it like a normal Dark Souls boss. It felt very fair. Like none of this boss's move set felt like it was bamboozling you. Yes, the giant mouth laser was unblockable, but I think it is okay to let people assume that you can't block laser beams. They have to be dodged. In fact, that seems more obvious than the inability to block grapples, right? So I'm not going to hold that against it. It also introduced a type of attack that we see later in the final boss of Overture, which are another type of unblockable attacks that erupt from the ground. This is again nothing new, but it's the first time we see it in Lies of P. This guy is like, I think he's the source of the petrification disease. He's worshipped like a pagan idol by the alchemists, and they seem to be both like worshipping but also fearful of it. Like, gosh, I want to know who in the alchemist saw this thing and went, yes, that is what I want to be when I grow up. It's Melania. Gosh, not even close, but I kind of see where you're going with that in how it like looks and its vibe a bit. But yeah, I think this thing really should have done the corrosion status effect, given that it seemed to be the source of the petrification disease, but it did not. And that's even my complaint. And for the sheer amount of presence this boss had, I just kind of wiped the floor with it. It took me a couple tries, and I don't think it should have taken me the tries it took me. I just mucked up several times. It's not a bad thing. I will put it in the Proud Souls boss category. Right here with Fallen Archbishop Andreas, right? He was a fun boss. I think they did a great job with him. I just, like, he wasn't crazy special. I can't say he's peak cinema or even close. Especially for, like, something that was supposed to be the source of the bullshit, right? I'm gonna preload a couple images here. Alright. And now we get to the bastard himself. And I'm not saying that as an insult. His name is Lumacchio, leader of the bastards. Bam! The second to last boss in Lies of P Overture. Lumacchio. I have a lot to say about him. Mostly good. Um, they make you really hate him, right? But in like a good way. He's that kind of villain that's hateable in a well-written way. He shows up in Hotel Krat and makes himself like a vendor NPC and then fucks off, right? Um, you kind of get the feeling that this guy is maybe a scoundrel, in case being the leader of the bastards wasn't enough of a clue into that, right? But he starts to get some character development when you meet him after you kill Veronique, and he shows regret for that having happened to her, right? And seems to be on your side, points you in the direction of Leia, blah, 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 right? But then, in that horrible level that was the bridges of ice between ships, he ambushes you like a cock, and he shows his true colors in a most like monologue-y, bastardy fashion, right? Like this guy is very mustache twirly, but it works for him, right? Blah 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 blah. I'm sad that that had to happen to Veronique, but it did have to happen, and I was the one who did it, and I got paid, so bite me, right? That kind of attitude. It felt really good to kick his ass. His first phase is basically a stalker fight, but they did something interesting, I noticed. He has the flinch factor um, of most stalkers, but unlike most stalkers, you can't flinch him out of attacks, right? If he's in an attack animation, you won't flinch him very easily. And even then, when you hit him and flinch him, you are getting one flinch. So it's kind of optimal to like heavy attack, light attack while he's recoiling, but then back off as you would a normal boss, right? They also do a good job with his presentation of like you get him down to half health, but then he heals himself with the alchemist's medicine, which again, like I don't know anybody who does not go, "Oh, you bastard," when a boss heals itself, right? Like bro's earning his title is all I'm saying, okay? And yeah, so you find him like that. He actually has a weapon you can get from one of the early bosses. Like that's his weapon that you get, which is super cool. And then in the least shocking turn of events ever, turns out the alchemist's medicine did in fact turn him into a slavering monster, right? It's I think his second phase in a way is actually easier than his first phase, right? If not for the decay. I've been calling it corrosion this entire time, but it's decay, right? He's much more jumpy, but it's all like preamble, right? He'll pounce and he'll pounce and he'll pounce and he'll jump, and it's super telegraphed, and then he'll collapse on the ground. I think he's the only boss in the game who I would say his second phase is easier than his first phase, but I also think that's on brand because he just transformed into a Heliodorus monster. Like, bro doesn't know how his body works. Bro suddenly is, like, lopsided. I can't help but wonder what happens if you spare the guy, right? Because you do get the option to spare or murder him at the end, and I, of course, murdered him because, man, fuck that guy. Justice for Ronique, right? But he's a really well presented boss fight and a very, very solid, like, second to last boss. I'll put him in, like, maybe just below the Watchmen in, like, We Were This Close to Greatness, right? He was missing any kind of uniqueness. Like, he had a couple cool things he could do in his first phase, but his second phase just kind of fought like you expected a carcass to fight. There was nothing really special about it, right? I think his second phase really held him back as far as like interests mechanically, right? Right, last swig of water, because I'm going to finish talking about the final boss here, and I'm going to hopefully do that in one, well, not breath, but you know what I'm trying to say. Alright, the final boss of Lies of P Overture. And I guess by that definition, the final boss of Lies of P, period, is none other than Arlecchino. Oh, wait, no, not that one. Arlecchino! Yeah! So, My thought at the end, one of the thoughts I had at the end of base game Lies of P was the fact that, gosh, it was kind of disappointing that with all the build up Arlecchino had, that when we found him, he was kind of already dead. He was hooked up to a wall, telling his riddles, and it was really just whether or not you wanted to kill him. Which, of course, I did, because he deserved it, right? And I don't regret that now with what I know of Arlecchino. Like, as far as story, this kind of goes without saying. Arlecchino's a really cool character. He's kind of like, if I were to describe Arlecchino, picture the Riddler, but with the energy and malice of the Joker, and also he's a murder puppet. That's Arlecchino, right? And that's frankly a really good recipe for a character. And the voice actor they got to do his role was so on top of it, man. Like, from the outset, from that first introduction to the Riddle Master, I loved Arlecchino's voice, and having him as a boss fight was, gosh, having to wait for the DLC was so worth it. Like Arlecchino was, yes, 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 right. I will say that while his visual design in Phase One is absolutely peak, this is exactly what I couldn't find a good like full body shot of him, right? But it's exactly what Arlecchino should look like. He's a murder puppet who's just human enough to be unsettling, and he's like super tall and lanky with like Jack the Ripper style weaponry and a top hat. He's perfect. Like I genuinely love the visual design of Phase One Arlecchino. That said, the actual Phase 1 itself is kind of a joke, right? It is very much just preamble until Phase 2. I could almost get through Phase 1 without needing to take any healing, which is good because Phase 2 was rough. And mind you, I will say, quick aside with his boss fight mechanic, right? Storyline wise, you are meant to fight Arlecchino alongside Leia. Partially because this is canon, right? Leia was the one who defeated Arlecchino in the end, right? And you're time traveling and mucking about with that, right? But the game also gives you the option to not do that. Leia starts over there on the ground and it gives you plenty of time as Arlecchino saunters over to you to pick Leia up, right? But you don't have to. And in fact, I do intend to at some point go back and solo Arlecchino, right? But as a 2v1 boss, his first phase was a joke. That's okay because the second phase more than makes up for it. Blammo. Arlecchino, the Blood Artist. Holy crap. Like, this reveal was savage, and, like, there are 2 points where I would say Lies of P becomes an anime. One is when you fight Romeo and you bust open his giant ass puppet to reveal this like twink body underneath, which is very anime. And the second of course is the Arlecchino Blood Artist fight because you defeat him, he goes through his maniacal villain laugh and rant, and then he transforms into this tall, hyper edgy, blood cloaked monster with a literal extra pair of limbs that have buzz saws attached to them. What the hell? As a quick complaint, though, base Arlecchino was like the perfect visual design. I think that second phase Arlecchino is a bit over designed. He's way too extra. And frankly, like a lot of what he does has me going like, wait, am I playing the same game I was playing before? Right? Because like he opens phase 2 with blood magic. Like, hold on, what do you mean you're going to summon skulls out of the blood and hurl them at me like bombs? I'm playing a steampunk game where all the magical stuff is gross zombie shit. What are you doing? And how? Right? One moment. And so, like, there was a bit of a thematic disconnect between Arlecchino and the rest of the game but I think that's okay. He had the build up to earn it, and frankly, the fight was cool enough that I don't have a problem with it. Um, I think solo Arlecchino is a nightmare. I don't know if he's a Melania level nightmare, mostly because the status effect he inflicts break, despite being the obnoxious kind, where if you have any, you're just fucked, right? Um, break is so much less threatening than shock or like Scarlet Rot from Melania, and while his move set pressures you like Melania does in Elden Ring, he lacks the like input reading that Melania had. Melania was also a really unique fight in the sense that she flinched like a Stalker and Lies of P does, but was so threatening otherwise that she kind of needed that downside, right? Arlecchino doesn't have that going for him. He feels like more like a normal boss. It's not a bad thing, right? When we talk about what probably the hardest boss in the game, I'm gonna compare him a little bit to one of the hardest Souls bosses I've ever fought, right? Break as mechanic lowers the healing you receive from items, which can be really crippling, but nowhere near as much as shock, which lowers your stamina regen. Because you still have all your defensive tools, you just take the item to get rid of break and then you heal, right? Or you just accept the healing debuff and get on with your life, right? It's not extra damage, it's not making you take more damage. And I think only his buzzsaw attacks actually inflict break. Besides that, the most threatening thing he does, outside of just, again, being a constant, aggressive, relentless bastard, right, is like the shockwaves of blood that he does are very difficult to dodge because, like, typically you've just been avoiding a flurry of slashes, and then suddenly the ground erupts below you. It's so rough to, like, I am looking forward to fighting Arlecchino solo, but holy crap, it's going to be rough. It's going to be so rough. He's just a hard boss, right? Leia makes him much, 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 much easier, if for no other reason to have something to distract, right? Like, anybody who's ever played a Souls game with a multiplayer aspect, or like Elden Ring's summons, even if your summon doesn't do damage, just a distraction factor is enough to drastically make up for the boost in HP that a boss gets for fighting them with a friend, right? That and like I could have chose to fight Arlecchino solo, but the first time I wanted to beat him, I wanted the cinematic fight, right? I wanted to fight side by side with Leia. It was what the story was leading up to, and boy, howdy, it was worth it, man. You go full anime and do a like twin Omni slash with Leia on this dude, right? And then when you finish the fight, you get the full cinematic, like, you take Leia's weapon and you eviscerate him, and that is the final, except not really, end of Arlecchino, right? I think this is the only fight that takes Romeo for sheer cinematic value. And it's clear that's what the developers wanted. Like, Arlecchino was alluded to the entirety of Lies of P, and you didn't get to fight him, right? And so this is the devs going, yo, this bastard that you were waiting to fight, well, now you not only have a chance to fight him, but maybe change the future and save Romeo in doing so. Except Geppetto ruins that for everybody, and I hate him. Ahem. But yeah, Arlecchino definitely earns his spot as one of the best bosses in Lies of P. He was so cool and so memorable and so everything. And in closing, I found this image that somebody made to describe Arlecchino, and I can't unsee it. I cannot unsee Radon Riddler as Arlecchino. It's way too fitting. But yeah, so I will place Arlecchino the Blood Artist. He goes in this tier. Do I put him above Laxasia and Marquiona? I don't No. I think I'm gonna keep him here, though I might change this placement depending on how I feel about him after the one-on-one fight, right? But for now, I think he's good there. He might end up being more frustrating than fun, in which case he would go down, or maybe even down here. But for now, he's here just because the pure cinematic value of his fight was so good. And he also was just genuinely difficult. He was a fantastic capstone to Lies of P. And I am so excited for Lies of P2 or whatever these developers decide to cook up in their twisted little heads, right? So here is my tier list of all the bosses in Lies of P. I think I'm pretty happy with everything's positioning. And it really is true that while like the the eight bosses here in the middle tiers were fairly forgettable and or boring or just doing their job, right? Everything above them was like okay, and above I've expressed my issues with stalkers, right? So everything above this line, like that is 15 bosses that are all just really solid 10 bosses that are still like whoopsies still like decent bosses, and I'd say this game only had one boss I genuinely didn't like and didn't have fun fighting because break is stupid and that was the only thing the door guardian did. But yeah, I'm pretty content with this tier list. I'm pretty content with Lies of P. Like gosh, that was Lies of P was the first game I ever streamed, and I'm really glad I picked it, right? And I was so excited when Overture just kind of dropped in my lap and bamboozled me with its very existence. And so, yeah, I think with this tier list, I will bid a fond farewell to Lies of P until we meet again. If anybody has any like for Souls games at all, I cannot recommend Lies of P enough. It's kind of the whole package. Every complaint I have about Lies of P is a nitpick at best. And I've been playing the records that you can unlock in that game as we've been doing this tier list. And so you know that, like, if nothing else, this game's soundtrack is great, right? I love this game. And I don't know. It would be really cool if, like Jay Doodle said earlier, that if she was one of the developers, she'd be blushing, right? I really hope someday that maybe a dev from Lies of P finds this tier list I made and goes, "Whoa, this dude was really passionate about our game. We did a good job." Kind of a cocktail dream, but who cares? We dream big in this house. Anyway, tomorrow I'm gonna play In Stars in Time again. We're gonna go back to chapter 4 because there's some stuff you have to do, and we're gonna go back for Loop. There's a whole other fight and a whole other ending involving Loop, and we're going back for them. So see you tomorrow for Lies of P. I've been Mordred. This has been my tier list of Lies of P Overture, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. After burning some bridges. Bye bye.